Alfred, you're rocking the Nats hat today.
Had to switch it up a little bit.
Despite your race, but hey, we're all baseball guys. It's cool to do that. We're going to jump right into it. I'll start at the bottom. And again, I'm going to cover 7 teams and Alfred's going to cover 7. And it's not in any particular order. But number 14 in our power rankings, again, is Missouri. This was probably the easiest decision of our power rankings. We both had Missouri last. Look, it is always a tough job at Missouri. No different for Carrick Jackson, first-year coach there. What a weird weekend for Missouri. It loses Friday 3-1 against Northern Kentucky. It comes back for a 28-10 win on Saturday, and then ends the series on Sunday with the 16-15 loss. Missouri, to me, clearly the 14th team in the league. Jackson Lovich is carrying the load for Missouri offensively. He's hitting 349, 434, 674 across the triple slash line of average on base percentage and slugging. And it's hit 4 home runs. I think it's going to be a tough year for Missouri. All right, I've had the Mississippis in the same tier for a bit, and I've got Ole Miss at 13 this week. But some positive signs for the Rebels after those 2 losses to Hawaii first weekend. Ole Miss has played better. Played Iowa this last weekend. It lost the Brody Brecht Friday night game, but then it came back and won the last 2. Also won 2 midweeks. So Ole Miss has been 4-1 since the last edition of the power rankings. Good offensive club. 2 guys I've got my eyes on there. They really hit it big in the transfer market with Andrew Fisher from Duke and Jackson Ross of Florida Atlantic, who combined for 13 home runs, which leads us to another Mississippi team at 12. And I think these teams are pretty close. But Alfred, you've got Mississippi State. Tell us a little bit about the Bulldogs and where they stand.
Yeah, finally a pretty good week. For Mississippi State, they beat Jackson State pretty badly, putting up 19 runs and go on to sweep Mount St. Mary's over the course of the weekend. The 19-run weekday win over Jackson State included Dakota Jordan. Me and you, Chris, have said this all year. Once again, putting together a great game, 3 for 3, 5 RBIs. And then Joe Powell, 3 for 4, 4 RBIs as well. They accounted for a lot of runs that game. And really, Jackson State just didn't have a lot going for them early, and they just fell behind. And the Bulldogs carried that all the way to the finish line. And then they started out hot again. The offense, 12 runs in the first Friday win over Mount St. Mary's. Hunter Hines, Connor Husak, and Logan Kohler combined for 7 RBIs over the course. Logan Kohler combined. Those 3 combined for 7 RBIs over the course of that win. And then a good start from Nate Dome. 7 innings pitched, 8 strikeouts, and just 1 run earned over that course of time. And really the next thing to highlight over the weekend was Urangelo coming in again on Sunday and having another shutdown game. He's really been the steady piece in that pitching staff in Starkville. And he's, kept it going with 15 innings pitched and a 1.15 ERA. That's got to be close to the top of the SEC as starters go. I mean, I would imagine it's up there to some extent. He had 10 strikeouts in that Sunday showdown against Mount St. Mary's. But again, the Bulldogs needed this kind of small little winning streak going. By the way, their season started with up and downs and whatnot. So they come in at number 12 this week.
Yeah, I think their pitching seems like a little better than it was last year with Dome and Ciente. St. J, I think it is actually. Excuse me. I always mess that name up. But in any case, it feels like they've got a little more pitching. We'll know when the games get a little tougher. But some encouraging stuff for the Bulldogs so far. Same with Georgia at number 11. Well, it's a tough league. When you're 10-1, you're 11 in the power rankings. That's a tough lot in life. And look, Georgia didn't really do anything to make us feel worse about them. I just think that's how good the rest of this league is. It took 2 from Georgia Tech. It's probably going to get a 3rd game from Tech. I would presume they'll finish that game that Georgia led 9-3 in the 5th inning. So Georgia got a chance to add a win to the resume later against an ACC club, presuming that goes down. Georgia did lose for the first time last week, losing one, I think it was 19-6 to Michigan State in the midweek. If you're picking MVPs of the SEC so far, I think it's got to be Charlie Condon. He's got the triple slash line, triple crown so far, leading the league in home runs, average, and on base percentage. He's got, I think, a 1909 OPS with 8 home runs. 7 guys in that lineup with at least 3 home runs. Georgia checks in at 11. We'll see about the pitching. The bullpen's been better than it's been in past years so far, but again, we're not going to see anything like the SEC slate for most of these teams, and Georgia would certainly be in that category. Though again, beating Georgia Tech maybe a sign of some good things. All right, number 10, Kentucky. Alfred, what do we got on the Cats this week?
Good win again good week again for Kentucky. They beat Western Kentucky during the week and then swept Lipscomb over the course of the weekend. When I was looking at them, the one thing, I think we've talked about it a little with them, there's not really sources of power coming from that lineup this year. I looked and, there's no leader. There's like 6 different players with 1 home run. And there's no one on that team right now with more than 1 home run this season. So I think that's something to watch out for. But again, the guys that produce and get the runs in on offense are Emilian Petrie and Nick Lopez. I think they're the best all-around hitters on the team. They're both batting 349 plus for the Cats. And then the pitching just continues to be just a question. It wasn't horrible at all, by no means this week. I mean, the offense was able to get the wins they needed. It's just with Kentucky, they're going to have to need some – I think the power hitting isn't as big of a deal if they find pitching, but I think one or the other is going to have to start showing up if they want to kind of be more competitive once SEC play comes around and whatnot. But a good week nonetheless. And that's really it. I just think, the power hitting needs to show up. Petrie and Lopez continue, if they continue to be the guys to get runs in, this team will be good for the remainder, I guess, for the next week of non-conference play. But I think there'll need to be a little more changes before they head into SEC play. And honestly, Georgia's a team who I think can be just as good as them. I think the reason we had Georgia behind was that run rule loss they had at home, and Kentucky just won every game they had this past week. So that's what I got on the Cats.
Yeah, recipe for winning looks a lot the same as it was last year. We'll see if they're able to do it at the level that they did. All right, number 9, South Carolina. Tough weekend, I guess, lost a game to the weather. I don't know if that's going to be rescheduled or not, and then loses a pair of 5-4 games to Clemson, which always gets people riled up in that state. I continue to think this is a good team. We know about the middle of that lineup. We'll see about the pitching, but there's been some good stuff so far. In fact, South Carolina's only given up, 34 runs through 11 games. That's not bad at all. What have we got on the Gamecocks, Alfred?
Yeah, they had a rough going with Clemson. Of course, that one game got postponed. The other 2, I think, were both 5-4 losses. One came in extras, and then one was just regular 9-inning baseball. The Saturday game, Eli Jones started on the mound for them. Did not have the greatest start. He gave up 9 hits, I think, over the course of his time on the mound, and Clemson just really built off of that by getting runs into the plate. And then really the back half of the Clemson bullpen was just kind of shutting down South Carolina's lineup late in these games. I mean, they gave up, I think I wrote down here, they had just 1 hit in the last 4 innings on the Sunday game, and they didn't get a hit in the last 3 innings during that Saturday game. And that killed them down the stretch in a 1-run game. So tough one there. They did have a good game. I guess we could talk about it against Gardner-Webb during the week. Gavin Casas hit a big 3-run homer to kind of open that game up, and the pitching from South Carolina, which I think has been the strength of this team so far, to shut down the running Bulldogs during the course of that game. I think, South Carolina is going to need a good next week of non-conference play for them to be pretty competitive towards the top of the SEC, but Clemson's a tough team. I mean, I have a hard time kind of giving them the thumbs down, so much against Clemson. It's just, I think, down the stretch, the hitting was not great, and then Eli Jones just was not as, I think, on point as he really can be starting on the mound for them.
Yeah, going to be a very heavy hitting environment again this year, I think, if you look at the runs scored and the home runs. So just keeping the ball in the park and keeping guys off base are going to be a key for them. Really, so far, I see this in tiers. I think you got Missouri at the bottom. I think you got the Mississippis in some order at 12 and 13. I think you got Georgia, Kentucky, kind of in a tier there on their own, maybe do very different ball clubs. And I think you got South Carolina leading a tier of the next 3 teams. So that's one of them. The next one is Auburn, which I've got that one. Really good weekend for the Tigers. took 3 or 4 against Connecticut, outscored the Huskies by 18 runs total. That's a big thing I look at. If there's a concern, it's Joseph Gonzalez. He gave up 6 runs in 2/3 of an inning this weekend, but there's been some depth on this pitching staff. You got Ike Irish, their catcher, who's hitting 370, 463, and 783 are his 3 slash lines with 5 home runs. Good offense from anybody, particularly from your catcher. Butch Thompson's team is always in the middle of the discussion. Auburn's got some really good wins so far and could argue that it's ranked higher. Now, here's where we get a problem, though, with all that, is that, boy, the teams in front of them, they're either playing out of their mind, which Auburn's kind of in that category too, or they're all preseason top 10 teams. So the next one, and this again is probably more a lean on where we had them preseason than based on results. Although, again, the teams in front of them have done work too. That's Alabama at 7. That pitching staff is really deep so far. Ben Hess has been fantastic. 13 innings, 24 strikeouts, 4 walks, ERA of $1.38. They're 2 transfers. Gage Miller, the JUCO, and TJ McCants from Ole Miss are both hitting over 500 over 400 average wise, over 500 slugging, and slugging well over 700, 750-ish. In fact, McCants is slugging 936. McCants 6 home runs, Gage Miller 5. Alabama's out-homered teams 24-8. Pretty sure the pitching depth is going to be there. And look, no, to be fair, Alabama's schedule so far has not been against world beaters. Took a series from Manhattan, took one from Valparaiso. Got a little tougher this last weekend. Indiana, Arizona, Dallas Baptist. Alabama won the first 2 of those and then lost the DBU game on Sunday 7-5. So really not a lot to pick flaws with in terms of Alabama. We'll see where that goes, where the schedule gets a little tougher. All right, I've also got the number 6 team. That's Vandy. And Vandy's kind of in that lower part of the pack of 6 teams from here on out, all of which were preseason top 10 teams. Vanderbilt has struggled a little bit early. The bullpen has blown some leads, done some things, and won 2 of the first 3 out in Houston this weekend after winning 2 midweek games, was down 11-3 to Texas. Vanderbilt comes back with 11 unanswered runs. The bullpen this time holds the game. So Vanderbilt goes 3-0 out in Houston, but didn't really move up because of some other teams in front of them did. For Vandy, a few things to note. Cam Kozel, freshman, look out for him. Really good hitter in the 3-hole, hitting DH. A top-ranked recruit for Vanderbilt has really come on. Had a big weekend. I think had 2 4-hit games over the weekend for Vandy. So the Commodores hitting their stride a little bit. All right, in front of Vanderbilt is Florida. And the Gators pitching has been a little wonkier, I guess, than we thought maybe is a good way to put it. But Florida did take 2 of 3 at Miami this weekend. And that is a great win for Kevin O'Sullivan's club anytime.
Yeah, that's always good. Miami's a pretty good baseball program. For those of you who watch this and aren't as in tune as other people are, they're usually in the top 25 every year. So taking 2 out of 3 in Coral Gables is always a good goal for them. Beginning of last week, tough loss to Stetson. Luke McNeely was the starter, and he gave up a 5-run first inning to Stetson, and Florida just really struggled to come back in that game. And the same thing happened in the one Miami loss over the weekend. McNeely came in after Liam Peterson, who started, and they both gave up a combined 9 runs to the Hurricanes. So Florida had to play catch up in both of those games. On the bright side, though, looking in between, very good game against Bethune-Cookman. That was the other weekday game they had. Tyler Shelnut homered twice. Caglione homered as well. That was a 9-run game for them. The offense looked on point there. I just think for Florida, it's been all about pitching this week and whether or not it was good or bad. And it was either really good or it was either really bad. There's no in between with them on that. Going forward, I think they're obviously going to like pitching improvements for this last week of non-conference play before SEC starts, especially with the 4 in front of them and how their offenses are. And the good news for Florida, you're playing in Gainesville all the way until March 22nd against LSU when they when you go there to Baton Rouge to play them. You play the rest of your non-conference at home. You play Texas A&M at home to open SEC play. So you have a good bit until you play on the road. But again, was all about the pitching for the Gators this week. It really has been in the past, and going forward, that'll be something to watch with them.
All right, you've also got the number 4 Tennessee team here, which you watched a good bit this weekend. Tennessee really has not been challenged since that opening weekend against the Big 12, in which it went 2-1. Any big takeaways from the Balls obliterating everybody the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, they kind of dominated throughout at least this weekend. They've run ruled Bowling Green in every game they played Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We talked about power with some teams. Tennessee's got power for days, it seems like. I know the competition isn't up to par right now, but the Vols just have guys that can hit the home run ball in bunches. I mean, Blake Burke, Billy Amick, the transfer who came in from Clemson, 6 combined homers over the course of the 3 games this weekend. They were letting it fly in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. Good starts from the weekend, too, from Drew Beam and A.J. Causey. They both had 9 strikeouts and 1 run in their 2 starts they had. I think Causey pitched Friday. Yes, Causey pitched Friday and Beam pitched Saturday. And then during the week, they got a big win over High Point. High Point has been giving teams some headaches this year when it comes to baseball. So that honestly is not a bad win for Tennessee either. Kavares Tears, we've talked about how active he's been in the offense. He doesn't necessarily pop off the stat sheet, but he gets it done as far as hitting goes, and he went 3 for 3 in that win. Tennessee, honestly, they have power. The lineup's good enough. I think they sit them at the top of this league, but we would like to see some more challenges down the stretch as they get into SEC play.
Yeah, I think Tears is leading the league in runs, and again, the pitching for them, I think, was a little undercredited in the offseason, but we're about to find out a lot more. All right, number 3, I think to me the argument at 1 probably comes down to these 3 teams, although I really don't know that there's a ton of difference between them and the 3 behind them. But we got A&M at 3 this week. I think you could argue A&M at 1, or A&M finally played some opposition this weekend and remained unbeaten, the only unbeaten team in the league so far. I think the 2 big things to me, run differential, plus 98 so far. That's the best in league, and 18 runs allowed. That's not earned runs. That's just runs in 11 games. Everybody else in the league is allowed at least 31. So I'm not going to argue that necessarily we put A&M number 1 based on a very small sample size when we had some questions about the team coming in. But boy, Ryan Prager and that pitching staff has really caught my attention so far. And I think that's a surprise of the season 3 weeks in.
Yeah, and I've seen the comments on these power rankings so far. A&M should be higher. They're making us push them up there in a hurry. I think it was a big week. I mean, they had to go to neutral site to play Pac-12 teams, and Braden Montgomery had quite the weekend, I will say. 6 RBIs over the course of the weekend. He actually homered, if you include that RBI as well, in the first game that they had. And that really set the tone the rest of the way. The pitchers were great this weekend. Prager, Ashenbeck, Justin Lampkin also had a good start this weekend as well for them. So this A&M team, I think if they could put the pitching together with the hitting, because that's what we've talked about with them forever, it seems like, is the pitching. They can really be the best team in the SEC if they could put it together at the same time like they did this weekend.
Yeah, very, very impressive start. If we're just ranking, if we knew nothing about these teams and their personnel and what they've done in the past, I think you can make an argument that A&M's number 1. And that might be the right argument. I don't know. I've covered the league for 20 years now. I've seen some teams roll through weak schedules. And again, A&M's got a lot better. And then it looks a lot different against real teams. And that's not directed towards A&M. That's directed towards everybody. I think you just embrace some uncertainty at this point. And if you want to say A&M should be number 1, fine. I don't have an issue with it. But again, we're about to find out. By virtue of an 11-1 record and also defending national championship status, LSU checks in at number 2. What have you got on the Tigers, who also, like Vanderbilt, won 3 games out of 3 in Houston this weekend?
Yeah, they had a pretty good weekend. It started well, I'll start with the weekday game that they had before against Rice. That was actually in Houston at Rice's ballpark. Brady Neal and Paxton Kling, 9 RBIs combined. Those two obviously were the ones getting that offense going in a 16-run victory. Cade Anderson with a good start on the mound. He got the win with 7 strikeouts, 5 innings pitched. Really, the part where I was like, this looks like LSU of last year was the win over Texas in Minute Maid Park. They had Tommy
Yeah.
White and Jared Jones homer. Jared Jones, probably one of the best players in the SEC, or at least one of the best starts this season in the SEC as far as hitting goes, at least for power. Tommy White getting power. Whenever you can get Tommy White hitting home runs for LSU, it usually puts you in a very good direction. Michael Braswell, they've kind of hit the jackpot, I would say, so far with him transferring in from South Carolina, 2 RBIs in that Texas win. And if I were to tell you who the best starter in the SEC so far is, not named Hagen Smith, who we'll get into in a bit, it would probably be Luke Holman.
Yeah.
5.2 innings pitched, 12 strikeouts, no runs in that Texas win. He was massive, and that's not an easy Texas team to play at any season. So that's a good win there. The pitching was, I would say, against UL Lafayette. It really was just because the Cajuns hit a 3-run homer to keep him in it in that second game, but LSU was able to work their way out of it. And I just wanted, going forward, LSU has a very easy non-conference schedule right before SEC play. I mean, Xavier's their toughest opponent, and they're barely 500. They're going to be pretty well tuned by the time they get to SEC play very shortly down the stretch.
Yeah, Lafayette's no pushover. They can small ball you
Mm.
a little bit and do some things that are a little harder to defend in this era where guys are hitting home runs constantly. They do things stylistically that maybe you don't see as much. So, yeah, I think LSU, you still want more out of Gage Jump and Thatcher Hurd. But the Holman addition, he was one of the more coveted guys in the transfer portal for a reason. All right, number 1, Arkansas. And it's with some reservations. Arkansas is the lowest scoring team in the league so far, 80 runs scored. Offense has picked it up a bit lately, but the pitching, 31 runs allowed, is second behind A&M so far. And Arkansas' schedule, I think we probably argue, probably a little tougher than A&M's, although that may have evened out a little bit over the weekend. Yeah, but anyway, look, here's the thing. We knew that Arkansas had a great rotation coming into the season if all things went to form. I don't think there's a better rotation in the league other than Brady Tigert, Mason Molina, Hagen Smith. Maybe not in the country, although Wake Forest could have something to say about that. Teams are hitting 173 against Arkansas with a 754 slugging percentage. Offensively, the guy that's made them go has been Jared Sprague-Lott, who is a transfer from Richmond, right-handed hitter, who's hitting he's got a 543 on base mark. That's one of the best in the league. So Arkansas at number 1. Sorry, I forgot to put that banner up. And that, I think we both voted Arkansas 1. I tend to lean towards teams with pitching and defense when it's not clear. Arkansas, we knew had pitching coming into the league. Dave Van Horn's teams always defend pretty well too. So kind of go with what you know. If you can keep other teams down, where a lot of teams are having trouble doing that in this day and age, I like Arkansas's track record of doing that
Right.
this year and beyond. So we got the Hogs number 1, and they've got this weekend. Let's see, they've got who? They've got
I know they start SEC
McNeese
play.
State. Yeah.
Right. And they start SEC play against Missouri. So not to I hate to do this to Missouri, but for the Razorbacks, that's like a nice tune-up to start SEC play before you have to head to Auburn the next 3-game series. So
Yeah.
we'll have to see. We'll see. I have no doubts in my mind we'll see explosive pitching like we have all year. Yeah, maybe it'll change. I think if they run into a pretty top heavy lineup or pretty top lineup in the SEC like LSU, who's a little bit more like down the schedule, but that series is in Fayetteville. So it's interesting with that Arkansas team to see if their pitching is in fact good enough, to hold up against some of these teams that can just hit the daylights out of the ball, it seems.
Yeah, I did a double take on the schedule there. It's like I thought somebody had already played McNeese State, and indeed it
Mm.
had, but it was Texas A&M. So just double checking my facts there if you If you caught the stalling there, that's what that was about. But anyway, we'll see how Arkansas fares. My goodness, we've got, I don't know, I think at least 9 regional caliber teams so far. I feel confident that those 9 will probably be there at the end if the league doesn't just get the best of them, which it does to somebody. I think Kentucky's got a shot. Really, I could see any team in this league earning a spot in a regional at this point other than probably Missouri. I think just too big of a talent deficit there in year 1 for Carrick Jackson. But can't wait for it all. Man, this time in a week, we will be preparing for our first SEC on SEC regular season action. We'll be there for that. We'll be there for the last weekend, a non-conference series. We'll be back at it Monday with our power rankings. And again, as we get past basketball and into the SEC on the SEC only portion, there'll be a little bit more coverage here. But for now, we do the best we can and hope you enjoyed what you saw. For Alfred Ezman, I'm Chris Lee. This is Southeastern 14 presented by BetOnline.